Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman. This is the broadcast for October the 27th in the year of our Lord, 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got Lowell Nelson with me today, campaignforliberty.org, always doing a phenomenal job. Welcome back, sir.
Well, I'm happy to be back, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Wow, we've been gone for a little bit. I went to Branson, Missouri, had a fantastic time. You traveled, and did you win your basketball games?
Sure did. Well, won most of them. We came back with a bronze medal, Sam.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
Lowell,
you.
just so everybody knows, plays basketball in the, the senior games?
Yeah, senior games, the Huntsman World Senior Games down there in St. George every year. Every October they have them. Runs 2 weeks, and the 5-on-5 basketball runs the second week, and there are teams from all over the country that go play. They have different age groups. Yeah, I'm in the 65 to 69 age group, and when you turn 50, you can start playing in the senior games, and so they have dozens of teams in almost every sport. So for people who are interested, who are still active and want to stay active, then it's a great opportunity, great camaraderie. We see friends from all over the country down there, and it's just a lot of fun. And it's competitive, very competitive. There's former collegiate players, even some former NBA players that will go and play ball. And of course, it becomes quite a competitive atmosphere, but it is a lot of fun. So, that's what I do every October.
Keeps you healthy, keeps you in shape. You got to dig it. Encouragement for others to exercise more, huh, Lowell?
Yeah, for sure. It's great exercise.
All right. It didn't start with Donald Trump, says Ron Paul. He's spot on once again.
That's right. In his column posted last week at ronpaulinstitute.org, he's talking about the weaponization of federal agencies and the fact that that's really nothing new. Some people, if they were born yesterday, right, they would think that this weaponization of federal agency is something brand new, but it's not. And some people think Trump's prosecution of some of his political opponents is just unjustified revenge, that he's taking. In other words, the use of federal agencies to punish president's enemies did not start with President Trump. That's the essence of this column. And Ron provides several really good examples. Let's remember that FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, right, in the 1940s, he used tax investigations against political opponents. He targeted individuals, including publishers of newspapers that were highly critical of his domestic and foreign policies. JFK in 1960s, right, used the IRS and the FCC to drive his conservative critics off the radio. LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, right, he used the IRS and the FCC to silence his critics. Quote, one tool that was used to silence conservatives was to accuse broadcasters of violating the fairness doctrine by favoring conservative commentators, end quote. Nixon used the IRS against his political enemies. Quote, the Nixon administration also threatened television and radio companies with revocation of their broadcast licenses unless they provided favorable coverage of the administration, end quote. During Bill Clinton's administration, the IRS not only targeted conservative and libertarian organizations, but it also audited Paula Jones after she sued President Clinton for sexual harassment. And during the G.W. Bush years, the IRS targeted organizations critical of the Iraq War. And when Obama became president, the IRS targeted conservative and libertarian groups focusing on Tea Party groups. Homeland Security issued a warning that those with pro-liberty bumper stickers, even those that supported Ron Paul for president, they might be a violent extremist. And Sam, you know this better than anybody else because I think you were on the list, right? When they were this just a few years ago when Homeland Security issued warnings about you and other organizations like you, faith-based Christian groups who supported and loved the Constitution, right?
Yeah,
you
we're
might
dangerous. We're a domestic threat, they claimed. They lied,
yeah.
too.
Yeah, so this lawfare stuff is nothing new, right? Even during the Biden administration, hundreds of Americans received harsh sentences for being present at the Capitol on January 6th, even though they committed no violent acts. Now, one example Dr. Paul did not include in his list here, Sam, is that President Lincoln's imprisonment of thousands of his critics during the War of Northern Aggression, which some people like to call the Civil War. So there is a long list of when the president takes power, usurps power basically. He's not authorized to do this, and it's not ethical for him to do this. But federal agencies targeting political enemies, and some of them they'll do this without even the president's knowledge. Some of them will just take it upon themselves because they want to curry favor with the president or other high-level officials in the administration.
And Lowell, this is where partisan politics betrays us, and this is why the founders warned against partisan politics. Rather than voting on principle, rather than voting for individuals who you believe will keep their oath of office, who will be honorable in what they do, etc., you're voting more for party. You're looking at the good old boy network and saying, hey, what do I got to do to be next in line? What do I got to do to make sure I'm on the right side of the discussion to garner more power? It's a power-hungry system that feeds on itself, right? And that's really why the founders warned us against this. And that's what's happening today. Who dare oppose Trump, for instance, right?
Yeah, because you then incur the wrath of the blonde-haired president, right? And he's powerful. So he's got a bully pulpit that is big, and he's right now trying to rain down fury on Thomas Massie. He's supporting and there's nobody better than Thomas Massie when it comes to adhering to the Constitution and trying to vote the way the founders would have voted, right? The framers would have voted the way Thomas Massie is voting. And yet, what does that get him? Well, it brings the wrath of President Trump against him, who is funding and encouraging somebody to run against Thomas Massie, who is probably the single best, congressman we have in the U.S. House. So, anyway, it's the bottom line here, Sam, is that and these are Ron Paul's words, quote, abuse of power is an inevitable feature of the modern welfare warfare regulatory state. Therefore, instead of focusing just on electing the right president, we should focus on shrinking the size and scope of the federal government to its constitutional limitations. End of quote. And I agree. Americans, we got to be free to exercise our right to criticize the government without fear of reprisal. As Thomas Jefferson said, quote, in questions of power, then, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. End of quote. Now, we do that, folks, because it is just a piece of parchment. We do that. We bind people down by the chains of the Constitution by voicing our displeasure when they cross the line, right? When they go outside the bounds of the Constitution, when they exercise power that they have no authority to exercise, that's when we come down hard on them, and in terms of voicing our displeasure with them and encouraging them to get back to the constitutional lines. Sam?
Well, Ron Paul's spot on that Trump didn't start it. That's true. But right now we have a Trumpian headache, according to Judge Andrew Napolitano, and I think he's right about this.
Yeah, he sure is. This Trumpian headache is a big one. Now, we've been talking the past several weeks about the administration's murdering narco-terrorists in the Caribbean Sea, right? Why has Napolitano been talking about this so much, and why have I been talking about it so much? Because it is a breach of due process. Quote, the Constitution's guarantee of due process requires it for every person, not just Americans. The operative language of the Fifth Amendment is this: no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, end of quote. Now, the claim of the administration is that they can eliminate anyone they designate as an unlawful enemy combatant, right? This came up in the Bush years, right? And after 9/11, Bush came up with this unlawful enemy combatant language and justification. And so he used it, and Obama used it. Now Trump is using it. And we'll get more into the weeds on this, Sam, but it's a terrible breach of due process.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got a lot to cover, little time, so be ready. Have your pen and paper in hand, and let's get to work as the American people and stand up for God, family, and country, shall we?
Are you ready to stand up for your community and support your local sheriff? Join the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and become a vital member of the Sheriff's Citizens Posse. At cspoa.org, we empower citizens like you through weekly webinars, arming you with the knowledge to back your constitutional county sheriff. Together, we can uphold our Constitution and ensure liberty and justice for all. Your community needs you now more than ever.
This is a battle between truth and deceit. A battle between forces that would enslave this country in darkness, and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in fact.
TheEpochTimes.com.
My brother and 2 other boys were the ones that got in the car with her, and she was drunk. The road that goes to her house is like really windy, and she was taking that road at 80 to 100 miles per hour, and it hit into the road barriers. Her door flung open. She ran out across the street to get away from it, and the other 3 boys were trapped in it, and the car exploded. And then when my mom found out about it, she called me at work. I don't care what you have to do, just get up here to the hospital. You know, I parked my car and I went inside, and they took us back to this little room. My mom told me that Jay had been killed, and I lost it. The other people, they're like, well, you can drink, but just be careful when you drink, you know? So I don't want anything to do with it, because it took my brother away from me.
A public service message from The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Lowell Nelson here riding shotgun this morning with Sam Bushman, your host of Liberty Roundtable Live. We're talking about the Trumpian headache, a column by Andrew Napolitano posted at ronpaulinstitute.org. And we got we got justification for this unlawful enemy combatant idea. It started with Bush after 9/11 and in imprisoning all the prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. And now Trump is taking it up a notch, and he's saying that he can designate a person as an unlawful enemy combatant and then use the military to kill that person, to murder that person. And Napolitano is saying this is wrong, and I agree with Napolitano. You know, the claim they claim it is the intelligence gathered by American spies in the White House analysis of that intelligence. It's a secret analysis. The government's argument goes, quote, satisfies the president that the folks he's ordered killed are engaging in serious and harmful criminal behavior, and somehow is a lawful constitutional substitute for the jury trial and its attendant procedural protections that the Constitution commands, end of quote. Well, we don't actually know what the administration's process is for determining that these people are unlawful enemy combatants. Why? Well, because the Department of Justice labels it as classified information. And so Napolitano then asks an important question, quote, how could a legal argument possibly be secret in light of well-settled First Amendment jurisprudence, end of quote. Well, he answers his own question here, saying it can't. quote, the Supreme Court has ruled consistently that there are no secret laws or secret rationales for employing the laws. Moreover, it has ruled that the First Amendment assures a public window on government behavior whenever it seeks to take life, liberty, or property, end of quote. Now, the last time we sought legal justification for a targeted killing was during the Obama administration, when President Obama ordered the CIA to kill 2 natural-born Americans. You'll remember these names when I say them, Anwar al-Awlaki and his son. The DOJ claimed a secret legal rationale. Well, some brave soul leaked that rationale to the press, which was that, and this is the rationale, which was that al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old son were like fleeing bank robbers who were shooting at the police. That was the rationale that got leaked to the press. Well, it's an absurd rationale because al-Awlaki was not engaged in any violent acts. He had been followed by a dozen intelligence agents during the final 48 hours of his life. Those agents couldn't legally arrest him because he hadn't been charged with a crime. But using Obama's logic, they could legally kill him. It just makes no sense at all. And when Napolitano and others who monitor the government's infidelity to the Constitution pointed out the flaws in the government's rationale, well, the government then reverted to the argument that it is probably using in the speedboat cases nowadays, right? That its secret internal deliberations are a constitutionally adequate substitution for traditional due process. Did you catch that, folks? In other words, during the Obama years, they justified their killing of al-Awlaki by saying their secret internal deliberations are a constitutionally adequate substitution for traditional due process. Well, it gets worse, folks, and we'll soon understand why Napolitano entitled this column a Trumpian headache. Well, because before al-Awlaki was murdered, he filed an injunction against Obama in the U.S. District Court in D.C., in which he argued that Obama was planning to kill his son. The DOJ argued in court that no such plans were in place, and that even if there were, the dad had no standing to bring the injunction. Only the son could bring this injunction. Quote, the Constitution requires standing. Only those truly and directly and uniquely harmed by a defendant may invoke the protection of a federal court. Well, the government, after lying in open court that there was no such plan to kill al-Awlaki's son, the government moved to dismiss al-Awlaki's case, and the court agreed, ruling that the son, the one who was murdered mere weeks after the case was dismissed, would have had standing to sue, right? So the court said the son had standing to move this judicial action. But alas, the son and the grandson were literally evaporated by a CIA drone while peacefully sitting at an outdoor cafe in Yemen. Well, how does that relate to this Trumpian headache, or why is it a Trumpian headache? Well, it's because the Trump administration ordered the military to murder these people on speedboats in the Caribbean. The stated public reason for doing so, the political reason, not a valid legal one, by the way, but the political reason is, quote, it is better to kill these folks before the drugs they are carrying reach their willing American buyers, end of quote. Well, these killings must leave no survivors, right? Because any survivors would have standing to bring a cause of action against the president and against the government. Well, guess what? Last week, the Department of Defense announced to its dismay that in one of the 7 attacks on speedboats in the Caribbean, it failed to kill all the passengers, and 2 survivors were rescued and arrested by the U.S. Navy. Now, Napolitano thinks the administration did not expect this legal quagmire. Quote, an arrest can only be based on probable cause of a crime. Well, what probable cause did the Navy have to arrest the survivors after it had destroyed their boat and any evidence in the boat? Of course, the government won't say. Well, without probable...
It's kind of like you say this kid has drugs, and the cops come and the cops say, where are the drugs? And you say, I flushed them down the toilet, sir. And the cop says, well, I don't have any evidence. I don't have any crime to prove, right?
Exactly right. So without probable cause, those two survivors could not be arrested. And so what did the Navy do with them? Well, the Navy set them free. Well, now this puts the administration in a pickle because those two survivors now have standing to file an action against Trump in federal district court. Quote, they have claims for attempted murder and kidnapping. Those of us who believe that the Constitution means what it says welcome this challenge. End of quote. That was Napolitano talking there. And so Sam, this really is an important issue because the protections of due process are so important. Right? Let's remind ourselves what the Fifth Amendment says. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Well, and to conclude his column, Judge Knapp quotes Justice Felix Frankfurter, who, I looked this up, served on the U.S. Supreme Court from 1939 to 1962, and was one of the justices who advocated judicial restraint. Frankfurter said, quote, the history of human freedom is paying careful attention to the procedures the government employs, end of quote. And so bottom line here, Sam, is that the government is today using this made-up doctrine, this judicial doctrine of enemy combatant. And they're justifying it by saying that they have, that their White House determination of, how did they put it, of a problem with these people is a sufficient substitution, right? Its secret internal deliberations are a constitutionally adequate substitution for traditional due process. Nothing could be further from the truth, Sam. That is a blatant lie, and thank goodness that Napolitano and others are calling them out on this lie.
Yeah, think about the protections of due process, ladies and gentlemen, to make the point, no person shall be. That's no person. It doesn't say if you're a citizen. It doesn't say no person shall be deprived of life. Wow. I mean, this is just taking life. You're judge, jury, executioner by who? The president and the president's advisors in a foreign jurisdiction? I mean, that's really the problem that we're having here. Liberty or property without due process of law. And you look at that and you go, okay, what about the boat? I mean, their private property is literally destroyed. What about that? Now, I'm not defending these people because they are probably drug traffickers. The point is that we need to go about it the constitutional way, ladies and gentlemen. Congress has authority over mark and reprisal. Congress has the authority over war. Congress has the purse or the funding for this stuff. If the president wants to do this, let's get Congress aboard to take care of business properly.
Well, that's what I would say too, Sam. And Ron Paul said the same thing when he was in Congress. He actually introduced a bill that would basically a letter of mark and reprisal. And, of course, the Congress wouldn't touch it. They wouldn't even allow it to be discussed on the House floor because they don't want constitutional solutions. They want to give this authority to the president, let him make these tough decisions. It's unconstitutional, folks.
And they want the party to be the king. And they want whoever serves that king, that party, to be on board or be absolutely ridiculed, mocked, shut down, and replaced. It's disaster. All right, for Lowell Nelson, campaign for liberty.org, and yours truly, lovingliberty.net. Spread the word, share the love. Back in seconds, we're going to talk about the Charlie Kirk assassination. No one buys the government official story. Okay, that's the problem. Where do we go from here is the real question. Lowell and Sam in seconds on TV.
How would you like to help this program reach more people and earn silver at the same time? Call or text 801-669-2211 for complete details.
Breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm Rich Thomason. Jamaica is bracing for a most unwanted visitor, perhaps the most powerful hurricane the island has ever seen.
In the hours before Hurricane Melissa makes landfall in Jamaica, the authorities have issued evacuation orders for several areas, including the coastal town of Port Royal, and warned people to seek immediate shelter. The storm is expected to be one of the strongest to hit the island on record, with meteorologists warning of 225 km/h winds and up to a metre of rain being dumped on Jamaica in the coming days. The U.S. National Hurricane Center has said the storm could bring catastrophic flooding to some parts of the island.
The BBC's Will Grant says Melissa is a Category 5 hurricane, landfall expected tomorrow on Jamaica. No reports of injuries, but there is damage to homes and businesses in the wake of tornadoes raked parts of southern Mississippi over the weekend. Now in Japan, President Trump says he is looking forward to his meeting later today with the country's new prime minister.
I hear phenomenal things. She was a great ally and friend of Shinzo Abe, who was my friend, the former prime minister, and he was great. He was one of my best. He was one of the best, and the group, he was one of the best, really best. And I know they were very close.
After Japan, it's on to South Korea and the expected meeting with Chinese President Xi, amid reports of progress on a U.S.-China trade agreement. The Russian saber rattling is growing louder. The Kremlin reports testing a new nuclear-capable cruise missile that it claims flew more than 8,000 miles. President Trump reminds the Russians that, in the president's words, we have a nuclear submarine, the greatest in the world, right off their shores. Watching Wall Street, the Dow is up 239 points. The Nasdaq ahead 358 points. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm, and Chuck McDowell definitely not an attorney. This is Chuck. If someone talked you into buying something really silly and you want to get out of that silly little thing, my advice, get the facts. Call me and I'll send you our timeshare exit kit absolutely free. Inside, you'll learn how timeshare works and all your options for cancellation.
Call Wesley now for your free exit info kit. 800-762-6565. That's 800-762-6565.
Hey, I'm Mike Slater. My dad passed away at the age of 63. It's out of nowhere. Had a stroke. Super hard, obviously, for the whole family, but my dad had life insurance. This is why I have life insurance for my family, for my wife and 4 kids. And the best place to get life insurance is ethos.com, because you can do it in 10 minutes. And there's no medical exam and no blood test, just a few health questions. Get life insurance in 10 minutes so your family is protected. Ethos, E-T-H-O-S, ethos.com/Mike.
Cybercrime is exploding. Take Sarah from Sweet Delights, whose world crumbled after having to close with not being able to bounce back. Small businesses are prime targets, but the right strategies can keep yours safe. Jay Hill, CEO of Network Providers, has co-authored The Cyber Playbook Simplifies Cybersecurity for Business Owners with Strategies to avoid costly breaches and fines. Build a strong cyber attack response. Secure your business with key protections. Cyber threats aren't slowing down, but you can stay ahead. Protect your business. Ensure its security for tomorrow. Get the Cyber Playbook today at networkprovidersinc.com/cyber-playbook or call 385-446-5500 now.
Looking for an IT partner that truly understands your needs? Managed IT Services is the answer. We meet with you regularly to discuss your goals and form a tailored technology plan. Our customers have called us a trusted advisor who delivers. When it comes to IT, we do it all. Firewalls, cloud storage, server migration, and more. Say goodbye to long-term contracts and hello to a team that earns your business month after month. Call 801-706-6980 now and let Managed IT Services transform your IT experience.
Have you ever had great honey? No, I mean really good, all-natural, raw honey? Well, now you can, thanks to localhoneyman.com. We can ship out our locally made honey all across the U.S. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Plus, Local Honeyman has so many different flavors, like Utah Wildflower, High Desert Delight, Happy Valley, and Blackberry, just to name a few. So purchase your delicious raw honey today at localhoneyman.com.
All right, back with you live. Sam Bushman, Lowell Nelson, campaignforliberty.org. Thanks for being alongside for the ride. We've got all kinds of hard-hitting news right now. You know, the debate about Charlie Kirk's assassination will go on forever. I don't believe we'll ever get to the bottom of it. And I know a lot of people think they already have. But whenever an investigation, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not telling you I'm an investigative expert, but I am decently intelligent. And I will say this, whenever investigations become more narrow over time, you can believe that there's a real attempt to get to the bottom of it, get to the truth, eliminate things, add things, update things, continue to revise, build timelines, document people, places, and things. You know, investigations narrow over time. This Charlie Kirk investigation continues to broaden, widen. The more we talk, the broader it gets, the wider it gets, the more complicated it gets. Sad but true. Nobody buys the official story, really, that I know. Nobody. And the problem with that is that that means that, you know, the massive majority of people are usually not wrong. The question becomes, what now? Well, a lot of people are trying to break it down and discuss it with good reason. I just don't believe they'll get to the bottom of it, Lowell. I really don't. I think it's intentional that they won't and that they can't. But a bunch of people are breaking it down. Let's get into the details, sir.
Yeah, Paul Craig Roberts asks the important question, who buried the investigation of Charlie Kirk's murder? Basically, the public still has almost no factual information about it, and we're beyond a month now since his assassination, and yet where are the facts, right? Where's the exit wound? Where's the bullet? If there was no exit wound, then you know, why don't we have the bullet? I mean, the information or the disinformation about this case makes very, very little sense. He writes, quote, Andrew Colvette, a spokesman for Turning Point USA and executive producer of the Charlie Kirk Show, said the doctor who examined Kirk told him there was no exit wound, and yet we are told that the bullet was fired from a .30-06 rifle used by a suspect, Tyler Robinson. This is an impossibility. A .30-06 would have left little of Kirk's neck or head. It's ammunition used for grizzly bear and moose, end of quote. Right? So there's no evidence that the doctor was asked about an exit wound. An internet search says the bullet has never been found. Right? If there's no exit wound, there's got to be a bullet still inside of him. And if it was inside of him, then where is it? And what caliber of bullet was it? Why isn't that? I mean, that's simple fact that the public should have. Roberts writes that the magic bullet that killed JFK was of a lesser caliber, and it blew out the back of his skull. So why didn't that happen in Kirk's case? It truly came from a .30-06, right? Other reports suggest that the doctor found the bullet under the skin of Kirk's neck. Couldn't have been a .30-06 bullet then. Well, then what caliber is it? Well, apparently no one has questioned the man in the brown shirt who appears to have fired a hand pistol, a palm pistol, at 15 feet the very moment Charlie Kirk was shot. All of the videos on Rense.com suggest that the brown shirt man is the killer. Why is he not in custody? Well, Paul Craig Roberts writes that Kash Patel owes us some explanations. Do they have a bullet or don't they? Was there an exit wound or wasn't there? Who is the man in the brown shirt, and has he been questioned? How did Tyler Robinson hide the murder weapon in the woods when he jumped down from the roof without a rifle in his hand? Right? I mean, these are questions, simple questions that could be easily answered by the people with the facts, but they are not being answered. Why? Because just like Sam said, they don't want to know the truth. They don't want the truth of this assassination to be known, to get out. Roberts ends his column this way, writing, quote, many have concluded that the man in the brown shirt was an Israeli agent who killed Kirk because Kirk had been leading the rising American generation to question rather than to worship Israel. The absence of a professional investigation and objective reporting of Kirk's assassination supports the belief that the Trump regime is covering up Israel's murder of Charlie Kirk, end of quote. Now, that's one column about the Charlie Kirk assassination. It comes from Paul Craig Roberts, who is a prolific writer, and I generally enjoy all of his columns, and I kind of agree with him on this. Now, there's another columnist also whose column was also posted at LouRockwell.com. Her name is Ginny Garner, and she's been trying to unravel the mystery of this assassination for ever since it happened. And in fact, her knowledge of Charlie Kirk was like mine. I really didn't know much about Charlie Kirk until his assassination, and then since his assassination, I've been reading and listening to a lot of his videos, and have been really quite impressed with the young man. And I've also been, I spent a few hours looking at the videos on Rense.com. I find them fairly persuasive. But Ginny Garner has another theory, and that is that his microphone battery pack contained a shaped charge that was remotely detonated. She believes that it cast a subsonic projectile, right, and that it had to be at the very same time there coincidentally had to be a report from a supersonic bullet, maybe from a .30-06 shot from the rooftop, but had to be timed perfectly so that the report from a high-powered rifle, matched exactly the moment of detonation of this battery pack, this shaped charge in a battery pack. Well, so it's a little further stretch, and I'm not quite willing to stretch that far, and that's why I tend to believe that he was shot with a palm pistol by that brown shirt man who stood just 15 feet away from Charlie Kirk. And in fact, there is pretty good video evidence of a little white dot being used so that the killer could tell exactly where his palm pistol was pointing. Very interesting footage there at Rense.com. But anyway, I just thought I would mention this other theory about a shaped charge in the battery pack, because there's no way that a bullet could have been fired from a battery pack with enough impact, right? The battery pack doesn't have enough mass. But maybe if it was a shaped charge, then maybe so. I don't know. Additionally, Ginny found out that there was a company in Tennessee called Accurate Energetic Systems that received a contract from May through August of 2025 to manufacture miniaturized demolition charges, anti-personnel, to support special purpose missions. And this company delivered the product, and then the factory was totally demolished in September prior to the murder. A shot may have occurred simultaneously from a low-velocity gun or rifle as a decoy to cover for the high-tech explosion, but perhaps also for redundancy purposes. So, I don't know, just an interesting theory that I toyed with and thought about for a little while. I don't go for it nearly as much as the approach on Rense.com. And so if you have not really studied the video at Rense.com, I think it's worth looking at. I think that's probably how they did it. But we learned a lot about Kirk, since his assassination, and probably the main thing we learned about him was that he had begun to oppose the war in Ukraine, and he started to question the IDF's atrocities against Palestinians in Gaza. 2 days before he was killed, he texted, quote, "Jewish donors play into all the stereotypes. I cannot and will not be bullied like this, leaving me no choice but to abandon the pro-Israel cause," end of quote. Well, Sam, the good news is this: Charlie's courageous example of living his Christian faith. I mean, that's the main thing I've learned since looking at Charlie Kirk since his assassination. He introduced Jesus Christ to thousands of people around the world. And I pray, Sam, that we will do as admonished in 2 Chronicles 7:14, which says, quote, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. End of quote. And to quote the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, Ether chapter 2, verse 12, behold, I'm quoting here, quote, behold, this is a choice land, and whatsoever nation shall possess it shall be free from bondage and from captivity and from all other nations under heaven, if they will but serve the God of the land, who is Jesus Christ. End of quote. Sam?
And that's why I say the solutions are not necessarily political, ladies and gentlemen. They start with God, family, and then country. Remember that, first of all. Secondly, you know, everybody wants to be the leader when it comes to breaking Charlie Kirk news. We'll talk about that for a quick second, then move on to the final topic. The Whiteheads have some great info that we need to consider. Hang tight.
I have a question. Can a nation conceived in liberty carry its head high if it denies protection to the youngest and most vulnerable of its citizens? Can a country founded on God-given rights continue to thrive without understanding that life is a precious gift from our Creator? I believe that great nations and great civilizations spring from a people who have a moral compass. I don't think a civilization can long endure that does not have respect for all human life, born and not yet born. I will be in earnest. I will not equivocate, and I will not excuse. I will not retreat an inch, and I will be heard. One thing I promise you, I will always take a stand for life.
As you are aware, America is divided over every fault line possible. This is intentionally fostered by those who do not love God, family, or country. We believe a peaceful future as a free people absolutely depends on civility. Clarion Call for Civility is looking for funding and volunteers at every level to make our hopes and efforts a reality. Please donate, sign our pledge, and help us in our sacred cause. Please visit callforcivility.com for more details. Callforcivility.com.
Bypass the mainstream narrative with Liberty News Radio at libertynewsradio.com. Engage with charismatic hosts live or on demand. We cover the crucial news focused on God, family, and country. News that other networks simply refuse to use. Think of LNR's hard-hitting news and podcasts at your fingertips, anytime, anywhere. Join us at libertynewsradio.com. Empower your day with the truth, because the truth will set you free. libertynewsradio.com.
All right, bottom line with this Charlie Kirk assassination, two columns we just talked about. Who buried the investigation of Charlie Kirk's murder? Unraveling the mystery of who assassinated Charlie Kirk and why. Well, I agree with this statement in Robert's column, which says this. I know Lowell mentioned it, but I want to repeat it because I think it's really quintessential at this point. Robert says Kash Patel owns us some explanations. Look, was there a bullet? Do they have a bullet or not? Was there an exit wound or not? Who's the man in the brown shirt? How about that murder weapon? Now, I know Lowell mentioned that before, but I wanted to reiterate that because that's really, in my opinion, what matters. Everybody's got a theory. Candace Owens trying to jump in front of the parade and have all kinds of information. Joel Skousen, World Affairs Brief, wrote an article about this saying there's 4 theories right now, plus the government story. So 5 narratives. Every one of the narratives has holes. And that's why I'm saying I don't believe we'll get to the bottom of this. They're making it broader, more complicated, more confusing, more fraught with, okay, where's Cash with some answers? I thought that Charlie Kirk and his family's, or the organization TPUSA, they were going to release some things they knew about Israel and about this and that. And I'm not here to criticize anybody. What I am here to say is that I don't think you're going to get to the bottom of it, because when top-tier governments want to pull off something like this, you never get to the truth. Now, there's some people that have done some interviews as well. Let's see, what's this guy's name? Let's see. Jimmy Dore is the guy's name. and I don't know him very well. I know of his show and everything else, but he had a big discussion about the Charlie Kirk assassination. And he had on a person who talked about all of the research related to this, meaning that there's people who are researchers who were able to query and break down the searches from different locations. And they say there was a lot of searches for different people relating to the hospital, to the Timpanogos hospital, to the surgeons, to all kinds of searches from Israel before the assassination. And they're saying this deserves scrutiny. Now, I don't know about all the facts. I haven't researched and verified all these different things. All I'm telling you is there's so many so-called smoking guns. Pardon the phrase. The problem with every one of the smoking guns is we don't know for sure if it's really true. Were all these searches really, documented by Google? Well, unless Google stands up and verifies that, yes, they're legitimate searches on their platform, you've got to trust whoever did the searches, right? You say, well, Sam, you can put up, you can take snapshots and pictures. Not in the deep fake world, you can't. The deep fake world is here, folks. We don't know what we're seeing, but we know this. Was there an autopsy done? I hear there was. I hear there wasn't. If there is, why not release it to the public? What are you afraid of? See, if there's not, why not? Covering up the location. They say they brick, pavers or bricks over. It's not the same now. Why? Well, Sam, because we want to return to normalcy. That's what Israel does. See, Israel goes to normalcy. As soon as there's a bombing there, they quickly, write it so that people don't live in fear, so that people can get past it. Okay, but what about a crime scene? We go on and on. Now you say, Sam, why don't you believe we'll ever get to the bottom of it? I think we will. No, you haven't even gotten to the bottom of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, have you? We were told we were going to get answers on that one, and now you don't hear a single thing. Now you don't hear a single thing about Jeffrey Epstein. They're just moving right along. They don't want you to hear about anything. At the end of the day, folks, I wish we could get to the bottom of the Charlie Kirk assassination, but I don't think we will. But I will say this. The good news is, as Lowell pointed out, Charlie Kirk and his courageous example pointed people to Christ. That's what we need to do. We don't need to worry about all the everythings and get to the bottom of everything. You'll probably never get to the truth. As soon as you give me who killed JFK, then we can really discuss the truth. And what will happen is 20 people will come to me with their theories and say they know this is the way it really happened. See, that's the problem. You're not going to get to the bottom of it. So let's focus on Christ. Let's focus on the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, and the Bible. 2 witnesses. And in the Bible it says, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. It says the way to have peace, the way to have protection, the way to never be in bondage, to never have captivity, is to repent and turn to God. And if we do that, he will heal our land and protect us. We will not have kings. We will not be in captivity. But we have got to serve the God of this land, who is Jesus Christ. With that, who would Jesus bomb? Asks Nisha and Nisha and John Whitehead. They asked that very question, Lowell.
It's a fun question to think about, Sam. They write this, notwithstanding his dubious claims about having ended 7 unendable wars, Trump has continued to squander the American people's resources and moral standing by feeding the military-industrial congressional complex's insatiable appetite for war, preemptively bombing nuclear facilities in Iran, blowing up fishing boats in the Caribbean, and flexing military muscle at every opportunity, end of quote. Well, they correctly write that such is the gospel of power, not the gospel of peace. Thus, it is a perversion of both the Sermon on the Mount, which came from Jesus Christ, and of the U.S. Constitution, which came from, of course, those who framed and wrote the Constitution in the summer of 1787, right? And thus we find ourselves at this peculiar crossroads. A president hailed by his followers as an imperfect vessel chosen by God to save the church and restore Christianity, while they turn a blind eye to his record of adultery, deceit, greed, cruelty, and an almost religious devotion to vengeance and violence, end of quote. Well, so that's how Whiteheads begin their column, sharing even more examples of the gospel of power instead of the gospel of peace. And then they ask the important question, what would Jesus do? This is a question each one of us ought to be asking ourselves all of the time. What would Jesus do? Well, obviously, Jesus taught the gospel of peace, not the gospel of power. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers," he taught, "for they shall be called the children of God." Christ taught us to be merciful and to love our enemies. Quote, Jesus rejected politics as a means to salvation. For him, faith was not about seizing power, but serving others, helping the poor, showing mercy even to enemies, and embodying peace, not war. He did not seek political favor or influence. He actively undermined it. End of quote. And so then the Whiteheads describe numerous aspects of the current administration and how it promotes power instead of peace. Quote, what was once the gospel of peace has been replaced by a national creed that equates killing with courage, dominance with divine favor, and obedience with faith. Under Trump's rule, this weaponized faith has found expression not only in rhetoric, but in action. Each act is justified as righteous violence, sanctioned by a president who sees himself as both protector of the faithful and punisher of the wicked. Yet beneath the veneer of divine mission lies the same old tyranny the framers warned against, a ruler who mistakes executive power for divine right and turns the machinery of government into an instrument of holy war. Both Jesus and the framers of the Constitution understood the same truth. Faith and freedom cannot be imposed by force. End of quote. Now, I realize that was kind of a long quote, but it's so powerful. The way the
Whitehead, it is powerful, and it really highlights the point that John and his lovely wife are making, which is this: are we into the gaining power, consolidating power, concentrating power? That's what the president and all presidents seem to do, save George Washington. God doesn't seek for power, and those who serve God don't seek for power; they seek to pull it down. That's really a distinction that cannot be lost on us right now. Do we want the president, and do we believe that if he has an ever greater quest for power that it will solve things? See, right now, the Trump folks believe, hey, we have got to concentrate all power in Donald. He means right, he'll do right, and it'll be good. What they don't understand is, hey, in a couple of years when Trump's not there, it's going to backfire. The shoe will be on the other foot, and the consequences will be disastrous. So we don't need more power in the president. We don't need to seek for power. We need to seek to pull it down. And by the way, the Book of Mormon and Another Testament of Jesus Christ is one of the greatest handbook for freedoms ever written. And that's where that doctrine of we don't seek for power, we seek to pull it down comes from. Lowell.
Exactly, yeah. Captain Moroni said that exactly in a letter to Pehorn, right? I seek not for power, but to pull it down. And the Whiteheads conclude their column saying the tragedy of our age is not merely that presidents claim godlike power or that the citizenry themselves go along with it. It is that people of faith who should know better consent to it. When Christians cheer the strong man who wraps himself in Scripture while shredding the Constitution, when they bow to the idol of safety, mistaking fear for faith, and when religious institutions fail to speak truth to power, we lose more than our freedoms. We lose our moral and spiritual birthright. End of quote.
Amen to that. And let's be very clear. Our goal is not to attack President Trump. There's a lot of what he's done that's very good, and we're grateful for that. But it's us. It's up to us, my fellow Americans, we the people, to be the moral leaders, to create a vanguard, to protect the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, from all. Sometimes enemies, foreign and domestic. Sometimes people with the best of intentions, but may not realize the value of the checks and balances. And the Constitution should be the political religion of our nation as we create a country and a people that's ready to receive the Savior, Jesus Christ, when he returns. That's my quest. Thanks for being alongside for the ride. Lowell, thank you. CampaignForLiberty.org, LovingLiberty.net. God save our republic.